Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show.
I know you want tax cuts. I want them too, and we will deliver them. But the best tax cut we can give people right now is to halve inflation and ease the cost of living.
Rishi Sunak delivers a highly anticipated speech at the Conservative Party conference this week, designed to reintroduce himself to Britain ahead of next year's general election. Our business correspondent Simon Pusey will soon be joining me with an assessment of the key moments. And later this month, Lagos State will welcome Nigerians and Africans from across the world to Badagry to recognise the role the region played in the transatlantic slave trade. Jermaine Sonwo-Olu, the senior special advisor on diaspora and foreign relations to the Lagos State Governor, will soon be joining me here in the studio for more insights. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, an explosion and fire at an illegal oil refinery site in Nigeria has killed at least 30 people, including a pregnant woman. Illegal oil refining is common in the oil-rich Niger Delta region of the country, as locals tap pipelines to make fuel to sell for a profit. The blast happened on Monday, and local community leaders fear the death toll will grow as search and rescue teams dig through the charred remains of people caught in the blast. According to the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, Nigeria lost at least $3 billion worth of crude oil theft between January 2021 and February 2022. French troops will start to withdraw from Niger this weekend, bringing an end to a military mission to quash a jihadist threat in the increasingly unstable region. The French Defense Ministry said the pullout of 1,500 troops and military resources will be completed by the end of the year. The announcement follows a rapid breakdown in relations between France and Niger's military rulers, who ousted President Mohamed Bazoum in July. To British news now. On Wednesday, the UK Prime Minister closed the annual Conservative Party conference with a rousing keynote speech designed to reintroduce him to Britain. Rishi Sunak was introduced by his wife, Akshata Murthy, in her most high-profile appearance yet. In accepting the poor polling for the Conservatives, the Prime Minister said Westminster had become a broken system and that he could change it. He made 3 big policy announcements on health, education and transport.
I know you want tax cuts. I want them too, and we will deliver them. But the best tax cut we can give people right now is to halve inflation and ease the cost of living. I'm confident that once flights start going regularly to Rwanda, the boats will stop coming. Just look at how our returns agreement with Albania has seen the numbers coming from there fall by 90%. I am confident that our approach complies with our international obligations. But know this, I will do whatever is necessary to stop the boats. And we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense. Today, our union is the strongest it has been in a quarter of a century. The forces of separatism are in retreat across our country. Nicola Sturgeon wanted to go down in the history books as the woman who broke up our country, but it now looks like she may go down for very different reasons. I am proud to be the first British Asian Prime Minister, but you know what? I'm even prouder that it's just not a big deal. Be in no doubt, it is time for a change, and we are it. Thank you.
Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so it's that time of the year again, Conservative Party conference. And I suppose depending on where you get your news, the Conservative Party conference is all about the partying, but away from some of the scandal. Of course, this was a really important platform for Rishi Sunak to spell out his plans ahead of a general election next year. It appeared to go pretty well, no gaffes.
Yeah, and for the last few days, he's really been overshadowed by some other people who may be sort of aligning themselves to be the next party leader.
Yeah.
Suella Braverman was the big speech that everyone wanted to watch. There was Liz Truss before that, obviously the last leader who some say wants to be the next leader. And then you had Penny Mordaunt's weird stand up and fight speech. So there's been a lot sort of going on and other things around that as well. Yeah, you had the former Prime Minister as well going in to sign her books as well. But I think it did go pretty well. He's trying to appease every single part of the party. The far right in the party really wanted HS2 to be scrapped. This is something they'd been talking about for a long time. High-speed rail and the northern part of it to be scrapped. And he's done exactly that. And they say they want that money to be spent on things like maybe giving inheritance tax, shelving that. That's a big sort of conservative thing. So let's see what he does with that. But that was the main announcement really in this speech.
Is that going to come back and bite him?
Well, I mean, previous prime ministers, you've had David Cameron and Boris Johnson both saying this is kind of their legacy because this was happening under them. It's been happening for a long time. Yeah. So they're very annoyed by this because they're going to, they wanted that to be, in 2040 or whenever it's going to be built, 2050, whenever it's going to be finished, that was going to be part of their legacy. And now it's not going to be there. So they've come out strongly and said they don't like what he's done there. But he's saying that the money, which so much has been spent already and it's gone over budget so many times and it's taken so much longer, could be spent in other ways. So he's announced a whole load of other infrastructure projects, smaller things around the north, which he says will be much better than ploughing on with this and pouring money into this thing that's going to take eons of time. I think a lot of people are looking at this and saying, I mean, if we can't build a railway line, look at other countries. Look how fast China does this. Look how many infrastructure projects other countries manage to do, and we can't. And that's quite embarrassing on the world stage that we can't even build a fast rail line. His point is that so much money has been spent already. There are lots of other things that you can do. And then other people are saying, well, if you can't even do that one thing that has been that has been promised, then how do we trust you to do all of these other smaller things? So. But that seems to have gone down pretty well generally within the party. And then there's some other things. He got his wife out on stage, which I think a lot of people were quite surprised by. She's been sort of in the shadows before. It's a touch of embarrassment.
In the shadows, but in the headlines.
Well, in the headlines, but he hasn't really brought her up. He hasn't, we haven't heard her speak much. She's obviously there ceremonially to meet the wives and partners of other leaders that come over. And she does other charitable functions. But he hasn't really pushed her into the limelight. Apparently, he didn't know her speech before she made it. Rishi Sunak is a stickler for detail. He wants to do every single thing. So I think that's quite surprising that she went out with carte blanche to be able to say what she wanted. But I think it gave him a little bit of personality and maybe a bit of humanity that a lot of people don't really see. And she said he was his best friend, her best friend, and things like that. So maybe that kind of helps his general personal appeal. And maybe that was what they were kind of going for as well. But there weren't really any big surprises within the conference other than that. He got a big standing ovation. And I think he'll have wanted that because the days leading up to this, everyone was saying, who is this Rishi Sunak guy? What does he stand for? And there's been so much talk about who the next leader is going to be and not really looking at him. And this happens a lot at party conferences. You remember Boris Johnson upstaging David Cameron years ago.
Of course.
The Liz Truss. This does seem to sort of be something that happens. I think another interesting thing is that he's talking, their slogan is basically taking long-term decisions for a brighter future. And it's quite hard for him to cancel HS2, which is by definition the longest term decision that they've had to make. He's cancelled that, and yet the slogan is taking long-term decisions. But £36 billion, exactly. It's hard to know whether that's exactly going to be because there's various conditions riding on that. But I think generally conference has gone pretty well for him. It is such a difficult job to keep this party together when you've got so many different factions wanting different things. But he seems to have appeased each of those factions pretty well. well. And yeah, as we keep saying, there's an election coming up. So he's trying to put himself and the Conservatives in the best possible position. And you're right, there have been no major gaffes from Rishi Sunak at this conference.
Yes.
Other people have got up and said some fairly weird things, but for Rishi, I think he was pretty much spot on in terms of what he needed to do his job. And yeah, there was nothing that's going to bring down the Conservatives or, drop them in the polls much. I think it was pretty spot on from Rishi.
Yeah, you're right about that. And he definitely was on top of his brief, as Rishi Sunak typically is. Was it an election-winning speech? Do you think, he could win against Keir Starmer?
I don't think it was election winning, no.
Right.
But I think it won't have done him any harm. It may have, helped him in the polls slightly.
What are the difficulties then?
Well, I think the fact that you've got Suella Braverman going out and briefing in New York and, really aligning herself, and she's a party favourite, right? Everyone was queuing to see her because she's further right in the party. And I think after 13 years, it's quite hard for the party to stay in the centre ground, especially as you have parties like UKIP don't really exist anymore in the form that they used to. So there is this right that's forming within the Conservatives that almost should be another party, but they are trying to drag everyone else to the right, and it's quite hard for people like Rishi Sunak, who a lot of people think is trying to appease the right, but isn't really that right-wing himself, even though he's cutting sort of environmental things, which would say that he is more right-wing than, say, Boris Johnson. But I think, the difficulty for Rishi Sunak and for the Conservatives is to really stamp their mark and say, this is what we stand for, when the party is so broad, when you've got so many people over to the right, and then, the people who are really in power, Rishi Sunak and his cabinet, who are more centrist, how they can kind of keep this together, because Suella Braverman's singing from a different hymn sheet at the moment. And then you've got Liz Truss causing trouble as well, and very many other factions within there. I think it's quite hard for them to be able to say, this is what we stand for ahead of the next election, and to really cut through without doing identity politics, without having a go at woke Labour, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and two former prime ministers publicly denouncing your key decision. It's not going to be easy, and I think it's going to be busy 12 months ahead of this general election. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Let's head across the English Channel now to discuss France, namely French relations with Nigeria that has become renewed under the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Earlier this week, the social enterprise Friends of Nigeria held a high-level business conference in Paris aimed at securing private sector deals between both nations. Abiodun Dominic Odunuga, an international development consultant, was one of the conveners, and he joins me now from Paris for more on this. A lot of people may not know that actually Nigeria is France's leading trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa. Can you talk more about this? Where is this business opportunity lying?
Very good question. Aside the traditional sectors such as oil and gas, construction, we've been having so much dynamism in the area of creative industry, the area of also digital technology. So all of these new emerging sectors are also on the way to be able to get more French investors to work with Nigerian stakeholders. In the past few days, it's been amazing. Beyond just coming here and just to also meet their counterpart and sign deals, because for us, it's not just about another conference. The theme for the event every year is partnership that works, transforming concrete deals. That's what it's about. And this year, we had many company CEOs who are still around. So aside Spotlight Nigeria, which is the 6th edition, between Tuesday and today, some of these Nigerian CEOs have been having backdoor meetings with different French investors. And as I speak to you, there are many of them already setting up the branch of the office in France here. And in a few months down the line, this will be announced. And it's time for companies to wake up. The opportunities and the goal for us is not just to help French investors get to invest in Nigeria, but also sieve out serious companies in Nigeria to be able to become more international and seek to scale up using France as a gateway to Europe, thereby increasing job creation and also their forex earnings.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global later this month, Lagos State will welcome Nigerians and Africans from across the world to Badagry to recognise the role the region played in the transatlantic slave trade. Jermaine Somo-Olu, the Senior Special Advisor on Diaspora and Foreign Relations to Lagos State Governor, will soon be joining me here in the studio for more insights. And of course, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. In a moment, I'll be sharing an interview I conducted with Jermaine Sonwo-Olu, the Senior Special Advisor on Diaspora and Foreign Relations to Lagos State Governor. But until then, here's a breakdown of the biggest business news stories of the week. According to Bloomberg, Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's planned visit to meet Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in the UK has been pushed back by several months. The trip was scheduled to promote investment and security ties between both countries. The controversial visit will be the first by the Crown Prince since 2018, before the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, allegedly at the hands of Saudi agents. Astronauts on an upcoming NASA mission will head to the moon decked out in Prada spacesuits. The luxury Italian fashion label will work with Axiom Space on the next generation of lunar spacesuits, which will be used during a NASA space mission planned for 2025. Axiom said the decision was due to Prada's technical expertise with raw materials, manufacturing techniques, as well as innovative design concepts. The car that Lewis Hamilton drove to his first Formula One win for Mercedes is to go on sale next month at an RM Sotheby's auction in Las Vegas. The vehicle won the Hungarian Grand Prix with Hamilton in the cockpit in 2013 and is the only Mercedes Formula One vehicle from the modern era not owned by the German luxury car giant. RM Sotheby's estimates its value to be between 10 and 15 million US dollars. A spokesperson for Mercedes declined to comment on the sale. Now to our final topic. Over the course of 3 centuries, more than 500,000 Africans were sold into slavery through Badagry's coast. In the decade since, hundreds of thousands of tourists have visited slave sites in the Lagos State region to commemorate their ancestors and reconnect with their roots. Later this month, the state will welcome another set of explorers. Jermaine Sonwo-Olu, it's a pleasure having you in the Channel's Business Global studio.
The pleasure's all mine.
Of course, we have engaged before, but you haven't been into the Channel's London studio. You are a familiar face to our viewers, of course, because you have been working with His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State, as the Senior Special Assistant on Diaspora and Foreign Relations. Can you talk to me about this role and how it's evolved since you were first appointed over 4 years ago? They took you away from London.
Yes, they did. Being in the beautiful city of London and also interacting with the diaspora population for a couple of years, working as the Publicity Secretary of Central Association of Nigerians in UK, CANUC, and also on the executive committee and a board member of NIDO, Nigerian Diaspora Europe. Coming back to Lagos to work with Mr. Governor has been a great opportunity, great privilege. And the role, as you can see, is diaspora and foreign relations. So that's dealing with the diaspora, Nigerian diaspora, ensuring that they are able to integrate, they are able to provide them with information and also support them when they want to come and invest. So those are the 3 I's that I focus on. And it's not just the Nigerian diaspora, but it's also the historic diaspora, like the African Americans, the Brazilians, those in South, North America, and those who have been dispersed all over the world and who have the affinity to the city of excellence, the center of excellence, and the city of aquatic splendor, Lagos, and also Nigeria. So we're trying to ensure that they integrate, they get information, and they can invest. And the second part has to do with the foreign relations, which has to do with consular activities. Lagos is also the home of many consulates and also Deputy High Commission's office from around the world. They situated in Lagos, being the former capital. So I ensure that I'm like a link between the government and the embassies or the consulates in Lagos. So it's a double role, but I'm glad to serve the beautiful people of Lagos selflessly.
Absolutely, and I'm a testament to that because, of course, we were in Paris together earlier this week where you delivered a pretty rousing keynote speech. Don't worry, I won't embarrass you by showing our audience evidence of you singing. You've got a great voice.
Wow,
You've got a great voice, though. But you did
you.
speak, of course, most importantly, wearing 2 of those hats, engaging with the Nigerian community in France about your governor's plans to welcome the diaspora to Badagry. And that's what I want us to talk about because, as you said, lots of blacks across the world have an affinity to Nigeria. It's not just Rema burner, Davido,
Correct.
jollof rice. It's so much more than that. Can you
It
talk
is.
to us about what's happening later this year?
Later this month, there's something historic taking place in the historic diasporic city of Badagry in Lagos. Many of you, or some of the viewers, and you may know about the historic significance that Badagry has. First of all, for hundreds of years, there were like 300 people taken from the shores of Badagry through the Indian Ocean, through the Pacific, to various countries around the world.
For the transatlantic
slave trade. And it was quite unfortunate, but it's also presented us with an opportunity now. So there's like before there was like a brain drain or a purple drain. Now it's not like the brain gain. They're coming back to
the great return.
Yeah, the great return. And that's what we're going to be celebrating. It's called the Joy of Return. In collaboration with Adore, and also, which is the African Door of Return Experience, and NIDCOM, Nigerian Diaspora Commission in Abuja. So we're going to be collaborating, the Lagos State being the lead supporter and sponsor of that event, because we want people who were taken as slaves, who were not slaves, who were dignified human beings, who had their businesses, who had their families, but taken as slaves, and we now want to welcome them back and say, you know what, you're coming back as chiefs, as kings, as queens, as people of renown, and we want to celebrate them. That was from the 18th to the 22nd of October this month. We're going to be welcoming back. It's going to be a fantastic celebration. They're going to have a naming ceremony. The whole of Badagry is going to come out and celebrate with them. Something like this has been done before, and it's very, very euphoric. It's very, very emotional. They cry. They feel that connection, because, and once you know where you're from, it can help you know who you are and what you're meant to do in life. And when they can now retrace their roots, take for example, Bishop Chidi Jakes realized that he's 98% of Nigerian origin.
And Meghan Markle.
Yeah, Meghan Markle, exactly. And then we also have someone like Wyclef Jean is also a Nigerian. And we have many people, Yanis Atekokumpo, the basketballer, a lot of diasporans who have actually excelled, who will now reconnect their roots to Nigeria. But you may be surprised that it's not only the blacks there. And when I went on a trip to El Salvador, and there's a group of people called the Afro-Descendia. They look white like Spanish. They look white. You will not even know that they have some black blood. And many of them have connected their roots to Africa and to Nigeria. Wow. So we're calling people from El Salvador, calling people from Brazil. That is a different story entirely. Millions in Brazil, they worship the Father, they worship our religions. They are connected culturally and ancestrally to Lagos in particular. And we want to welcome them back and say, the governor of Lagos State, which is the governor of the diaspora, he's inclusive with the diaspora. He's going to invest in this project to ensure that when the diaspora come back home, they know that Lagos is a city that welcomes them, and that Lagos is their new home.
I also want you to talk most importantly about how Lagos and Nigeria can capitalize on tourism and on events like what's happening.
But for the first time, we have a president who we can call a diasporan. This is someone who grew up, who studied, who graduated, who has a certificate, who has an experience of being in diaspora. He has a diasporic experience, and he has the knowledge, having worked there. He can see international best practices. His Excellency, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is a perfect person to be in that seat and to connect the diaspora. So that being said, right now, you have to look at the diaspora, not just people who can remit 20 billion or 21 billions annually to the Nigerian economy. They're like the third non-oil sources of foreign exchange and remittances to the country. They are a valuable resource, but it's like it's like milking a cow, getting just the milk from it and feel that you're okay. But I won't say that we are diasporic cows, but we are diasporic C, creators of wealth. We are diaspora creators of wealth. So you may just focus on the diaspora remittances, which is the milk. But what about the cheese? What about the butter? What about the beef? What about the ability to replicate itself and to also add value through the skin? There's so much that, so to say, a cow can produce. And that's why there's so much the diaspora as creators of wealth can add, not just when it comes to remittances. So we have to start looking at that.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.